This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. What's up and welcome to Hot Takes, the show where I go through the comment section and read your hot takes for the week. This first comment is from an anonymous user and it's from the first video of the week reacting to the Browns playoff positioning. It says the Texans are the one team I didn't want the Browns to face in the first round. CJ Stroud is scary and it doesn't make many mistakes. The Browns defense is going to have to put a lot of pressure on him and not give him time to throw the ball where he's at his worst. Well, ain't that the case with every quarterback left in the playoffs, though? Like, I understand we would have preferred a team that doesn't belong in the first round, right? Because honestly, when we say, oh, man, I wanted Jacksonville, I wanted this team, I think what we're really saying is we wanted a team that didn't actually belong in the playoffs in the 4 seed. We wanted a cupcake. But it's the playoffs. You didn't get a cupcake. You got a team in the Texans that are young. CJ Stroud's a good quarterback. But, hey, man, you're going to have to play good quarterbacks to get through the AFC. Like, that's always been the case. So we can't sit here and be afraid of it now. And if we're afraid of CJ Stroud, then how scared are we going to be of Lamar Jackson and Pat Mahomes and Josh Allen? All guys you're potentially going to have to go through because they have the top seeds in the AFC. So, yeah, I understand CJ Stroud's a good quarterback, but you don't think CJ Stroud is better than Lamar Jackson. You don't think CJ Stroud is better than Josh Allen yet. You don't think CJ Stroud is better than Pat Mahomes. So I just don't see why, or not why. I don't see the point in being overly concerned just because a team has a good quarterback. I mean, they have to worry about us too. So again, yes, CJ Stroud's a good quarterback, but CJ Stroud also has to worry about Myles Garrett. CJ Stroud also has to worry about Zadarius Smith, Denzel Ward, Martin Emerson, Greg Newsome. Then this number one Browns defense, CJ Stroud has to worry about, and that's a bigger concern for the Texans than CJ Stroud is for the Browns. No disrespect to CJ. He's very good, very promising young quarterback, but this is also a quarterback going into his first playoff game, a team that's really young going into their first playoff game versus a Browns team that's been here before. Not saying that it's guaranteed that the Browns win, but the Browns still have some favorable matchups in this one that they should take advantage of. This didn't go from, and I get that people wanted the easy matchup, but this didn't go from, oh my God, you're playing the Jaguars, you're automatically going to go to the first round, to now you're playing the Texans, you're screwed, basically. Like, if you don't think the Browns can beat the Texans, then you don't think the Browns can beat the Bills, and you don't think the Browns can beat the Chiefs, and you don't think the Browns can beat the Ravens. Either we're good enough or we're not. The Browns have beaten quarterbacks who have been ranked higher this season than CJ Stroud, and it's the playoffs. Gonna have to play good teams. So, you know, I don't see the point in worrying about that so much. Michael with the next question says, Lawrence has a bunch of solid weapons on that squad and a Super Bowl winning coach. See, y'all get trapped up in this Super Bowl winning coach thing. Honestly, I think that North took the Jags' soul this season. They were never the same after the Browns-Bengals-Ravens stretch of losses. I'm with you, Q. Trevor equals famous Jameis. Yeah. Well, one thing to the whole Super Bowl winning coach, like, it's not really a thing. Like, your coach has to be good enough to be decent, but you're not winning a Super Bowl because of your coach. Like, that's just never happening. And that's why I don't love the idea of like a Super Bowl winning coach the same way people use Super Bowl winning quarterback, because coaches they're not that impactful on game days, especially on the positive end. Like, they can make some bad decisions, sure, but as long as you're neutral out there, you're probably fine. But yeah, Trevor Lawrence, as far as him being like Jameis Winston, I wouldn't go that far. Like, I think Trevor Lawrence is going to always have like a positive touchdown interception ratio. I don't think Trevor Lawrence is going to be a backup quarterback in a couple of years or anything like that. But I do think Trevor Lawrence is always going to struggle with finding consistency, and that there are going to be some years where we're ready to crown Trevor Lawrence, and there are going to be some years where we're ready to drown Trevor Lawrence. Like, it's just one of those type of players where he's going to have boom or bust years. The booms are going to be incredibly loud. The busts are going to be incredibly loud as well. And that's just kind of the player that Trevor Lawrence is, right? Think of him as a high level Jay Cutler or something like that, right? Like somebody who, when he's hot, he's hot. When he's not kind of deal. That's where I see him. Not necessarily Jameis, when Jameis wasn't really, Jameis's highs weren't as high as like Trevor Lawrence's is. Think more in the line of like Baker Mayfield, right? Where Baker, when he's playing well, when things are going right for him, he can get you to the playoffs. When he's not, you ain't doing nothing. And you might lose games because you got Baker Mayfield at quarterback. Another comment from an anonymous user. Hi, Quincy, I agree with your analysis of Trevor Lawrence 100%. I've always felt he was overrated. He has a long way to go if he aspires to being a top QB in the NFL. The biggest problem I see, as you alluded to, is the lack of consistency and poor decision-making. Having that said, go Browns. Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with that. The next video we're going to take comments from is, will Jim Schwartz be hired away by another team? Corey Johnson says, a lot of points about coaches are based purely on hindsight. Nobody knew for sure that guys like McDermott and Stefanski would end up being a good head coaches. There are too many factors to name in order to figure out if a head coach hire is going to succeed at any given organization. No, it's not. I'm sorry, Corey, but that sounds like bullshit to me, to be honest. And the reason it sounds like bullshit to me is people in the building identified that Sean McDermott would probably be a good head coach. And then somebody hired Sean McDermott and he was a good head coach. The same way that people in the building identified that Kevin Stefanski would be a good head coach. And he ended up becoming a good head coach. When you're looking for the things that actually makes a coach good at his job, which is not the fun shit, which is not the charisma, which is not the things that make coaches good at media appearances, right? Like, you ever notice the coaches that have the charisma, the shine, they're great at press conferences, they all end up working at ESPN and not for a football team, because that's what they're suited to do. They're suited to do what I'm doing here, to talk about football to people, because they're communicators, but they're not necessarily good coaches. And so many times teams fall in love or get wrapped up in the it factor with the coach. But no coach worthwhile really has the it factor. Like, maybe some in college, but that's a whole different ball game than the NFL. But in the pro level, when we're talking about coaches, they're usually very boring. Paul Brown, very boring, right? Bill Belichick, very boring. Sean McVay, very boring. These are boring people. And people get wrapped up in wanting somebody who feels exciting at head coach, that they hire these people and they're not good at the job. It's not difficult to find good head coaches. It really isn't. Teams make it much harder than it needs to be. There's a reason why Baltimore doesn't have these problems, because they look for the right stuff. There's a reason why Cincinnati doesn't have these problems, because they look for the right stuff. And Pittsburgh doesn't have these problems because they look for the right stuff. There are teams that know what to look for. They look for the right stuff. They find guys who are good coaches. There are college teams that know what to look for. They look for the right stuff. They find good head coaches all the time. And then there are teams that can't figure it out. And I promise you, there's a bunch of charismatic interview guys in there. And that's not saying you can't be a good coach and charismatic. Jim Harbaugh is a great example of somebody who's charismatic and a good head coach. But when all you're looking at is somebody's charismatic ability and their ability to entertain you by talking, which is what they're doing in an interview, then you're probably not going to hire the most qualified people, because you're not paying attention to the right stuff. That's what I'm saying. right? Because I don't want to make it seem like, oh, if he's charismatic and interesting, he's not going to be a good head coach. It's not at all what I'm saying. But I'm saying that people fall in love with that one aspect and then they just create the rest, right? Like Cliff Kingsbury is another example of this. Very charismatic. The resume behind him stinks, but nobody ever talks about that because they get wrapped up in the charisma with him. So no, I don't think it's this. I don't think finding a head coach is this difficult thing where you just gotta find somebody who could be competent at the job and let them do the job for a little while till they learn it. It's like literally any other management job out there. If you don't think finding somebody to manage a factory is this crapshoot, then it shouldn't be this same crapshoot. Like, find qualified people who have relevant experience, who seem to have the demeanor necessary to handle the job, to hire and work the job. And usually they'll be fine if you stay out their way. Not that difficult. Not that difficult. I think we keep talking about head coaches like quarterbacks, and it's not the same. It's really not the same. Like, I think that's people's issues with Stefanski, is that they don't think he's the perfect coach, right? He doesn't make the perfect decision every time. It doesn't matter. Like, he's fine enough. Like, if you have a good enough quarterback and a lucky enough run and a good enough roster, you can win a Super Bowl with Kevin Stefanski. Same way you can probably win a Super Bowl with Zach Taylor. The coach is only important to the point to where, like, hey, are they competent? Do they do their job well? If they do their job well, then we got to live with some of the stuff that they don't do well, as long as it's not game breaking. And nothing that Stefanski does is game breaking. But this isn't even a conversation about Stefanski. It's about coaches in general. I think we hyper-analyze coaches when it's just not necessary. It's not. Like, a good coach is a good coach. So the national media loves the Browns now. This is a video I did about the media's change of tune to the Cleveland Browns. Julie Wood says here, Quincy, thank you for taking time to explain how the Browns were stolen. The old Ravens joke is not funny. Appreciate you telling everybody how fans feel about Modell and why we are justified in feeling that way. You're the only person I know in the media who continues to stand strong on that point. Too many people say when the Browns move, and you always say when the Browns were taken from Cleveland. Important distinction, immense appreciation for you. I do think it's an important distinction too, because like as we get further and further away from reactivation, people forget what happened. And they think that the Browns moved when they never moved. The Browns never moved. That's a point that I think needs to be made, because it gives credit to Art Modell when all Art Modell deserves is criticism for everything that he did in the city of Cleveland, especially in the mid 90s. It kind of alleviates Art Modell's role in it, right? It's like putting his mistakes and how he hurt a city in passive voice by saying, oh, yeah, well, the team moved. No, the team was stolen from the city of Cleveland because Art Modell was drowning in debt. Art Modell could not make the Cleveland Browns profitable, a franchise that had been profitable for 50 years. He could not find a way to make them profitable simply because he was irresponsible. He spent company money. All of this stuff, like was a irresponsible owner. He did not manage money well. That caused him to go bankrupt. And because he went bankrupt, and because people who have money or even appear to have money get bailed out so often by other people with money, he was not forced to pay any consequences for his failures as a businessman. Instead, the city of Cleveland had to pay those consequences. And I think that's an important distinction to make, because when you kind of clear that out and make it seem like the people of Cleveland are crying about a team that moved, that didn't really move, right? Like how the Modells, not even people in Baltimore, the Modells would love you to believe, then you start to think, well, maybe Art Modell should be in the Hall of Fame. And that should never happen. Art Art Modell should never be in the Hall of Fame. He should never get rewarded or enshrined, because what he did was take a bedrock NFL franchise, run it absolutely financially down to the studs, a profitable bedrock national brand in the Cleveland Browns, a national brand that was launched by Jim Brown, one of the greatest, at that time, the greatest football player to ever live. He ran that brand down to the point to where it wasn't profitable, ran everybody associated with building that brand out of town, and then ran himself out of town. And people want to give him credit for starting the Ravens. No, that's not something he deserves credit for. I'm not mad at the city of Baltimore. I'm not mad at the people of Baltimore for having a football team, but let's not pretend as if our histories are linked any more than Art Modell being irresponsible. It's not the Browns moved, it's Art Modell moved. And Art Modell is a incompetent mess of a man, especially as a owner, and he deserves nothing but scorn in the football space, because this is the man who fired Bill Belichick, Paul Brown, and couldn't turn a profit with the Cleveland Browns. If we let people forget that, then they'll put him in the Hall of Fame, and he should never sniff it. Never in his life he should sniff it, because he doesn't deserve it. And we would be rewarding somebody who really did like actual economic damage to the city of Cleveland. Like, you know how important the Browns are to the economy of Cleveland? Like, did 4 years worth of damage to the city of Cleveland, cost people jobs, a lot of money. Businesses probably went out of business because they weren't enough demand, like for sports bars and stuff. Like, just a real impact that he made, a real negative impact he made. And it's not like he did it by just being completely irresponsible. And he never paid a consequence for that. I'm not saying he had to go to jail or anything like that, even though there are people who do argue that. But I do think that he should have never been allowed to get another team. He just shouldn't. He shouldn't have been allowed to own another team after that. But, you know, when we act like the team moved, I think that whitewashes a lot of damage that Art Modell did, not just to the Cleveland Browns brand, which he did a hell of a job destroying, but to the city of Cleveland too. Chubbs, no, I don't read that, bro. Pressure makes diamonds, and Deshaun has always been at his best with pressure. The Natty turning around the Texans, carrying that sorry franchise to the playoffs. All of his comeback behind wins. I agree. The added pressure is really good. Well, this is a little bit more scornful than I thought it needed to be. But yeah, I mean, the point is, Deshaun, people who are using, like, I don't even think they're actually concerned about Deshaun and the pressure he's going to face. It's more like concern trolling Deshaun Watson about this pressure he's going to face. Hey, man, I think he lives up to it or he doesn't. If the team has championship expectations next year, which they will, and he can't live up to it, all right, man, then we just going to have to find somebody who can. I'm not really sweating it. I think Deshaun can live up to that pressure. I don't think it would be the most surprising thing in the world if he does. And that doesn't even mean he has to throw for 5,000 yards or something crazy like that. Like, just play well enough to help us get to where we want to get to. And I think he's capable of that. We saw that he was capable of this, right? At points this year. So if he can come out and do that, we'll be fine. I don't care how much of 2020 it looks like. It doesn't have to look like 2020. It just has to look good enough to get the Browns where they need to go. And if he can do that, then I'm fine with it. But if he can't, then got to find somebody who can. You know, it's a bottom line business. And I'm more invested in the Browns being good as a football team and not necessarily Deshaun Watson throwing for 5,000 yards. Your take regarding the pressure on Watson due to the Flacco phenomenon is right on. Your point about willingly let the new player know how low the bar is, hit the nail on the head. If this dude can't handle the pressure posed by Flacco's success, then he's not the dude anyway. Yeah, if the thought process, and I don't believe this to be the thought process, by the way, But some people believe the thought process was like, oh, I can come to Cleveland and could just chill and not play well and people won't care. And that's not the expectation in Cleveland. It hasn't been the expectation for a little while here. But yeah, the expectation is going to be high. Like, we want to win now, and he's got to be able to bring us that. So, well, not even bring us that, because we're not even asking him to bring us that. He's got to be able to play his part in that. And if he can play his part in that, again, I don't think anybody's going to be upset. Grant Delpit returns for the playoff is the next video that I have in here. QB on demon time with these videos. 6 a.m. is crazy. I've been working hard, man. I've been working hard this season. So, y'all getting them videos, especially during the season, 3 videos a day. And as long as y'all watching them, I'm gonna put them out, and y'all been watching them, and I don't mind putting them out. So, hard work paying off for me. Hopefully my hard work is paying off for you as well. And if that's the exchange we have, I'm 100% fine with that. PDM says, I've got a lot of bad feelings and energy about this Texans game. Decades of futility is part to blame. Just have a bad feeling about CJ showing out on Saturday. Hopefully is just the reverse psychology. I always play on myself for decades when it comes to this team. Hey, bro. First and foremost, why are you doing that to yourself? It is a question I would love to ask. Because it seems like you're torturing yourself a little bit. Not like major torture. Not saying you're like, but yeah, little tiny torture to yourself. You don't got to do that. You don't got to do that. But hey, man, this Browns team's good. CJ Stroud's good. If CJ Stroud plays good, the Browns should be able to play well too. You can't worry about anything or everything going wrong and living your fears that way. You just got to let the cards play as they are and hope that you got strong enough cards to win the hand. That's really it, man. Browns matchup great with the Texans. This comment says, another thing I think is not talked about lately is how the defense is starting to get takeaways in the second half of the season. They started the season practically with none. Now they're in the second half of the season. They stepped it up. Yeah, I think the turnover margin has been, like, there was a point where we were closing the gap on that turnover margin. Like, I think we got to as low as -2 for the season. And then, like, we keep getting like these weird turnovers, so it doesn't go down. But yeah, I would say the Browns have been getting turnovers, and that's been huge for this team as well in the second half. Michael Sersky says rest will matter. The Texans have been in do or die games. They now are on short weeks, 14 days of rest and preparation. Flacco experience against them in the playoffs is huge. I would say just experience in general might be a big thing, right? This is going to be a huge moment for this young Texans team. And look, that might work against the Browns when it comes to energy, but it might work for the Browns, right? The Texans might run themselves out, be a little bit too hype. And we've seen what it looks like when a team comes out too amped up for a football game, that they're kind of like not settled. And if the Texans do come out unsettled in that first part of the game, the Browns are the type of team that can hit them in the mouth and make sure they never get comfortable. So yeah, the Browns do have that to their advantage. I also think that they are top to bottom a better roster than Texas. I mean, not Texas, in Houston. At quarterback, I feel like Houston has the advantage, but everywhere else, quarterback and running back, they have the advantage, but everywhere else, I feel like the Browns stack up pretty nicely. And I think the Browns matchups are fair for this week. So that's it for the hot takes. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.